What Uncle Sam Really Wants. Book by Noam Chomsky. Audiobook by the Learner's Library. Contents. Part 4. The Future. A. Things have changed. B. What you can do. C. The struggle continues. Part 4. The Future. Things have changed. It's important to recognize how much the scene has changed in the past 30 years as a result of the popular movements that organized, in a loose and chaotic way, around such issues as civil rights, peace, feminism, the environment, and other issues of human concern. Take the Kennedy and Reagan administrations, which were similar in a number of ways in their basic policies and commitments. When Kennedy launched a huge international terrorist campaign against Cuba after his invasion failed, and then escalated the murderous state terror in South Vietnam to outright aggression, there was no detectable protest. It wasn't until hundreds of thousands of American troops were deployed and all of Indochina was under devastating attack, with hundreds of thousands slaughtered, that protest became more than marginally significant. In contrast, as soon as the Reagan administration hinted that they intended to intervene directly in Central America, spontaneous protest erupted at a scale sufficient to compel the state terrorists to turn to other means. Leaders may crow about the end of the Vietnam Syndrome, but they know better. A national security policy review of the Bush administration, leaked at the moment of the ground attack in the Gulf, noted that, in cases where the U.S. confronts much weaker enemies, the only ones that the true statesmen will agree to fight, your challenge will be not simply to defeat them, but to defeat them decisively and rapidly. Any other outcome would be embarrassing and might undercut political support, understood to be very thin. By now, classical intervention is not even considered an option. The means are limited to clandestine terror, kept secret from the domestic population, or decisive and rapid demolition of much weaker enemies, after huge propaganda campaigns depicting them as monsters of indescribable power. Much the same is true across the board. Take 1992. If the Columbus quincentenary had been in 1962, it would have been a celebration of the liberation of the continent. In 1992, that response no longer has a monopoly, a fact that has aroused much hysteria among the cultural managers who are used to near-totalitarian control. They now rant about the fascist excesses of those who urge respect for other people and other cultures. In other areas too, there's more openness and understanding, more skepticism and questioning of authority. Of course, the latter tendencies are double-edged. They may lead to independent thought, popular organizing, and pressures for much-needed institutional change. Or they may provide a mass base of frightened people for new authoritarian leaders. These possible outcomes are not a matter for speculation but for action, with stakes that are very large. What you can do. In any country, there's some group that has the real power. It's not a big secret where power is in the United States. It basically lies in the hands of the people who determine investment decisions, what's produced, what's distributed. They staff the government, by and large, choose the planners, and set the general conditions for the doctrinal system. One of the things they want is a passive, quiescent population. So one of the things that you can do to make life uncomfortable for them is not be passive and quiescent. There are lots of ways of doing that. Even just asking questions can have an important effect. Demonstrations, writing letters, and voting can all be meaningful, it depends on the situation. But the main point is, it's got to be sustained and organized. If you go to one demonstration and then go home, that's something, but the people in power can live with that. What they can't live with is sustained pressure that keeps building, organizations that keep doing things, people that keep learning lessons from the last time and doing it better the next time. Any system of power, even a fascist dictatorship, is responsive to public dissidence. It's certainly true in a country like this, where, fortunately, the state doesn't have a lot of force to coerce people. During the Vietnam War, direct resistance to the war was quite significant, and it was a cost that the government had to pay. If elections are just something in which some portion of the population goes and pushes a button every couple of years, they don't matter. But if the citizens organize to press a position and pressure their representatives about it, elections can matter. Members of the House of Representatives can be influenced much more easily than senators, and senators somewhat more easily than the president, who is usually immune. When you get to that level, policy is decided almost totally by the wealthy and powerful people who own and manage the country. But you can organize on a scale that will influence representatives. You can get them to come to your homes to be yelled at by a group of neighbors, or you can sit in at their offices, whatever works in the circumstances. It can make a difference, often an important one. You can also do your own research. Don't just rely on the conventional history books and political science texts. Go back to specialists' monographs and to original sources, national security memoranda, and similar documents. Most good libraries have reference departments where you can find them. It does require a bit of effort. Most of the material is junk, and you have to read a ton of stuff before you find anything good. There are guides that give you hints about where to look, and sometimes you'll find references in secondary sources that look intriguing. Often they're misinterpreted, but they suggest places to search. It's no big mystery, and it's not intellectually difficult. It involves some work, but anybody can do it as a spare-time job. And the results of that research can change people's minds. Real research is always a collective activity, and its results can make a large contribution to changing consciousness, increasing insight and understanding, and leading to constructive action. The struggle continues. The struggle for freedom is never over. The people of the Third World need our sympathetic understanding and, much more than that, they need our help. We can provide them with a margin of survival by internal disruption in the United States. Whether they can succeed against the kind of brutality we impose on them depends in large part on what happens here. The courage they show is quite amazing. I've personally had the privilege, and it is a privilege, of catching a glimpse of that courage at first hand in Southeast Asia, in Central America, and on the occupied West Bank. It's a very moving and inspiring experience, and invariably brings to my mind some contemptuous remarks of Rousseau's on Europeans who have abandoned freedom and justice, for the peace and repose they enjoy in their chains. He goes on to say, "When I see multitudes of entirely naked savages scorn European voluptuousness and endure hunger, fire, the sword, and death to preserve only their independence, I feel that it does not behoove slaves to reason about freedom. People who think that these are mere words understand very little about the world. And that's just a part of the task that lies before us. There's a growing third world at home. There are systems of illegitimate authority in every corner of the social, political, economic, and cultural worlds. For the first time in human history, we have to face the problem of protecting an environment that can sustain a decent human existence. We don't know that honest and dedicated effort will be enough to solve or even mitigate such problems as these. We can be quite confident, however, that the lack of such efforts will spell disaster.